So this is the Integration Exchange. Welcome to you all. My name is Kevin Sherwood. I'm the Sales Director for CIE Group. I'd like you, if it's possible, to each introduce yourself. So start with yourself.
Darren Smith from Carbon Spring, a development company.
Jez Hildred, A&E Manager for 2N's UK team.
Ali Nasser, the Sales Director at Orion Security.
Wonderful. So today's discussion is cloud and access control. Is it hype or is there a real transformation happening within the market?
I think as a developer, it's the lack of take-up and understanding in the market. A lot of developers aren't aware of what's out there. And so the MEP consultants recommending the same old video entry system with your twin core wire, which doesn't have all the functionality that you can have. So I'd say that that's the biggest issue, is understanding of what's out there.
I think I'd back that up. And I think what's interesting is talking to people like property management companies is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the reasons you went for cloud on the project we did together is you're interested in having less staff on premise and being able to manage more and more remotely.
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
And talking to property management companies, their biggest cost is their staff. So if they can do a lot of the legwork of running buildings from a central hub rather than having to have bodies scattered around in every building, then that has a huge effect on their business, because I was talking to one property management company last year, and this is in the southeast, so the numbers are a bit inflated, but they said a junior member of staff costs their business between £40,000 and £50,000 a year. Well, as a technology manufacturer, you can buy a lot of tech for £40,000 or £50,000 and you buy it once. Whereas if you're using people power to do that same work, that's costing you money year after year after year. And so I think this is one of the areas where a lot of people in the field look at cloud and say, oh, it's just another tech. It's just another step of technology evolution. But what they don't necessarily understand is how it affects the business model of the customers who ultimately choose to go that route if they have it explained to them.
I think there's also a lot of misconception about costs. So we've just done a development with 2N, and putting in smart access control was neutral cost to the twin core video entry system with a dumb phone sitting in the apartments. It's just doing it intelligently and designing it in up front. And also going on to what he said, it's not just a convenience. So access, say, to the building is automatic. It picks it up from your phone, so you don't have to get keys or anything out of the pocket. The door will just open because we've got their wave motion. But when you get to the apartment, it's about the security. So we don't need someone on site, but if they lose their key, then that means through the management company, the key's got to go and be recut, or someone's got to go and physically let them in. So we send someone out. If they lose their key with their address, we then got to get into the realms of replacing the lock. Whereas with the smart control, you just do it, rescind the license, issue a new license, it's done. So it's a massive cost saving. It's more secure. It's more convenient. And there's always a trade-off between convenience and security. And don't get me wrong, cloud is the antipathy of security in many ways, because you are having stuff in the cloud, but it's not a homogeneous system. So I always refer it back. So we used to do a lot of consulting in Silicon Valley in client server, and really cloud is used as this big term, and it's just IP client server. So, and if you've got a bit of intelligence at the local level, so for example, the access control still works if all the comms are down, and you may not be able to do the licensing immediately, but the comms is so much more secure than 20 years ago. So this cloud is effectively like a mainframe dumb terminal. It's just that the cloud it's an IP based.
I do wonder if the term cloud actually, we'll give him a chance to answer in a minute. My own view on it is I just sometimes wonder about the term cloud. It is that I don't think it's what people think it is anymore. I mean, originally it was this all-encompassing, wrap everything in this term, the cloud, whereas now there's so many different ways of doing it that doesn't mean it's open to abuse or to be hacked or anything of that ilk. And it's as good as the people that are putting the protection in. Well, we don't sit there and every day probably spit ramifications out about the Bank of England and their security. You very rarely hear that. So if they can do everything in cloud as they do, we should be able to do it. It's just how those security and cybersecurity is applied, I guess.
No, I mean, I think everyone touched on good points. So I mean, also it's about education, but mindset. So what cloud is, when you start selling clouds, you know, experience with clients or even different organizations, it's like, oh, where's the data stored? But they're not realizing what the technology is. So I think as well, more education around the cloud, because it's there. I mean, the demand is there. I mean, in terms of using clouds even within security for monitoring, remote management is so much easier, smoother, rather than if something happens on site, you have to send guys on the ground, and afterwards that could be several hours till you get it repaired. And afterwards the client as well, operation for them to be more efficient is they have to be way around, especially if it's something critical and which is causing an issue for them. So on the cloud, you can actually manage it remotely, and actually resolve things quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it's just education, I think. That's what is the biggest, is when you're dealing with this.
You hit on a couple of interesting points in there. One is sustainability is a big term that, you know,
Well, it's been used a lot at this show this year.
everybody wants it, but when you ask them, so what is it you actually want, they can't really tell you. And one of the things is, I used to work for a home automation company, and we used to put servers in all of our clients' homes so that if there was a problem, we could remote in, and before we send a guy out in a truck, we know what we're letting ourselves in for. You know, some things, like you say, you can remotely turn something off and turn it back on and solve the problem. But if not, if it is something that requires, you know, a replacement unit or something, at least you're doing a truck roll, which is not a very eco thing to do, but you're doing it knowing what you're heading out to do, and you can probably fix it in one trip rather than have someone go out, look around, work out what's going on, have to arrange another trip, which, you know, A, is not very sustainable, and B, annoys the customer because they didn't get it fixed first time. The other thing around that is, you sort of touched upon this, talking about credentials and being able to remotely provision stuff. I went to an event run by the Association of Rental Living a few months ago at a housing development in Sheffield, and they did a tour, and I noticed they were using cards and fobs. And I talked to the property manager there about it, and I said, oh, you know, do people lose cards and fobs? And there were 350 flats in this development. And, you know, his face dropped, and it was like, yeah, clearly people lose their cards and fobs all the time. And the cost to replace that, yes, there's a cost to replacing the single-use plastic of a card or a fob. And if you've got 350 flats, call it to 700 residents, even if it's only 1% of them lose the stuff a month, which is very low, you're talking about 7 replacement things a month, every month. They have a cost to them, and on a sustainability standpoint, that's not ideal anyway. But there's also the time. If someone loses a card or a fob, you've got to email back and forth or have phone calls or whatever to arrange a time to hand over a new one and then go and meet them. Suddenly, before you know it, you've racked up half an hour of that property manager's time. And if that's happening 7, 8, 10, 12 times a month, that's a lot of time used up that should be being used for other things. So I think, you know, there's a whole sustainable argument as well, of getting rid of plastics and that sort of thing.
I think that, you know, that does lead on to a very interesting question, because the use of cloud then makes life a lot easier for integrators, for operators, you know, whether it be replacing credential, things of that ilk. And it makes it easier for you guys, because we live in this 24/7 world where everybody wants something done now, and because they know connectivity's there, they're not probably as open to it'll be tomorrow morning before we can actually get somebody there. Does that present issues to you guys in sort of manning and providing, even though you're not sending somebody, you've still got to have somebody available, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I mean, as a developer, we rely on our managing agents who are 24/7, but absolutely that rescinding a credential, issuing a credential is something that can be done remotely 24/7. So that person can also be let into the building remotely without someone being there. And even if it's just getting them into their apartment until the next day when they can get a new fob, or, you know, the one thing they typically don't lose actually is their phone. They'll lose keys, they lose cards, but that's the beauty.
Yeah.
Even a teenager, he will not lose their phone. So there are advantages. I mean, there's disadvantages with the cloud as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of version control. I mean, you touched on it. It's all done centrally.
I mean, that probably leads on to a question from my side, because obviously you guys see this more than we do as a provider to a product to the market, and probably less so than Jez does. Are there negatives to this cloud management, and is it that demand for 24/7 operation, or?
Well, I think the demand and expectation comes from everything that everyone's doing, your apps or whatever. Banking's 24/7 now, so it doesn't matter what industry you are, expectations come from other industries. So I wouldn't say that's a negative. I'd say one of the big negatives is a lot of the suppliers use cloud as an excuse to go to a subscription model. So, and they don't go hand in hand. There's no reason for that. Now, there is hosting, absolutely, of the cloud, of the servers. And actually, let's strip it back. It's only called a cloud because back in the 80s, people used to draw a cloud round. So, you know, there are certain reasons for costs, but they're like pennies or pounds, whereas people try and add on like £20 a month or whatever. So I think that's a downside. Ironically, 2N don't do that. You know, they effectively charge up front like some of our other suppliers. So it's a little bit more, but then the cost to host it is minimal.
Yeah.
I'd say the other negative thing is, you know, for people who don't understand cloud, Siri, like on your phone, is effectively a cloud model. So if you don't have reception and you ask Siri a question, it can't answer because it can't get out to the cloud and solve the problem. So if you're hosting stuff purely in the cloud and your comms goes down, then you're in real trouble.
Yeah.
So, which is why you don't want this homogeneous cloud. You need your certain intelligence at local level. So it's getting that balance right. And also inherently, the most secure thing is having nothing in the cloud because no one can get to it. I know you can create secure tunnels and encryption, but it's convenience cost, isn't it? You know, the ultimate security is to have one person stand there at the door, knows them, lets them in and out, but that's no use to anyone.
No.
Sorry, just one, that was a good point. I mean, before you mentioned about the perception of clouds, just where you use it. Where, you know, companies, organizations, subscription, they just say, oh, wait, we can just get a monthly subscription cash flow. They're not thinking about the technology and where to use it. So certain places, you wouldn't put a cloud kind of technology there because it won't fit for it. So you have to, so that goes back to also, let's say the integrators or suppliers having that knowledge of where to use it, the design, how to design the cloud for each site, because every site will differ to each other. So again, it's touching on your point before, it's about the integrators also having that kind of business model, because it's actually, rather than being a one-off project cost, it's more like a managed service. It's like supporting them as you know, like 2 years ahead, rather than here you go, this is the project, I've installed it, off we go. So cloud is treated differently. The mindset has to be treated differently than any other.
Actually, that is a good point. It's a bit like with Windows now, it's subscription based again, because they want.
Yeah.
But there is an advantage. You've always got the latest version of Word, or you've always got the latest version of Excel. And with a lot of cloud models, you've, exactly as you just said, you've got the latest version always because the cloud is updated, but rather than having all different versions, which is a security and a maintenance nightmare at local level, especially if you're dealing with, you know, a development of say 1,000 apartments.
Yeah.
That's an absolute nightmare. So doing something centrally, yeah, you're spot on.
Do you think 2N's approaching the market differently to other suppliers? It certainly seems from the comments that we've had that
Different, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a big market and there are all sorts of different approaches out there. I've been in tech for over 35 years, and certainly having looked at things like the computer network industry, you talk about Windows model and that, there definitely has been a big shift to software as a service, cloud subscription type models. And I think one of the things that sticks in my mind with 2N is they think like a hardware company. So even when it is things like add-on licenses or services, it tends to be, even if there's an approach of, okay, this is an additional thing and there'll be a charge associated with that, it tends to be a one-off thing. Whether that's right or wrong, to be honest.
Well, as a developer, we would say that that's definitely right.
But then again, other companies are able to offer solutions that are cheap to install because they're locking you into some contract, and actually over the reasonable lifetime of that product, you will pay a lot more money. I mean, one example is last year we announced an integration with Microsoft Teams, and we still have relationships with SaaS companies who do that as a service for our intercom and other brands. They have pricing models where you pay a monthly fee for the service. We have something where you pay a bit more money once up front, but that's it for the life of that intercom. What you get back is different in both cases. The SaaS companies can do things like recording of calls and video pass-through and all sorts of things that we can't do. Or rather, the Microsoft SIP.
And you're definitely going to be affected by a CapEx-driven model versus an overall budget.
And that's the thing is, and in property development, we often lose out where we're more expensive up front, even though we'll save maybe a lot of staffing costs, because the person who's making the decision, that's not their job to worry about once the building's complete. Their job is to build the building as cheaply as possible. But we've got an example at the moment where a very big multinational developer has a division that deals with student housing, and historically their approach has been, for each project, we'll just tender things out, we'll put in whatever the market dictates, and as long as it meets certain requirements. And now they've realized, actually, we have a whole bunch of buildings that all have completely different systems to one another. They don't actually do what we need them to do, because we've sort of learned what these student housing units, how they need to operate, and the spec we thought we needed isn't what it turned out we needed in the long run. So now, they're coming back to us and another manufacturer, and they're sort of building a standard and deploying it in the first one of these buildings. So basically they've bought kit, installed it, rip it out, install other kit that might be a touch more expensive. But if they'd done the touch more expensive thing in the first place, it would have been much, much cheaper than what's actually happened. But that's the sort of big picture thing of really think through the whole big picture of what is it we're trying to develop. And you guys, I think, did this very well, because you looked at how you wanted the building to operate and then said, oh, maybe just doing the sort of most basic low cost option for access isn't going to work for us operationally, in terms of marketing, in terms of the branding, what the user experience is and how you therefore want to market that building.
Oh, 100%. And it is more expensive up front. I always liken it, you buy your inkjet printer, which dirt cheap, but man, do you pay
over
for
the
the
time,
ink over time.
Yeah.
Or you go for the laser jet, and over time
you reap the return.
Yeah,
It's
so-
that initial outlay. Yeah.
and it depends who's making that purchasing decision. As you said, as a developer, we may be a little bit unusual in terms of what we're doing, but also as a developer, are you flipping it? In which case, you don't care. As long as it says smart on the box or it ticks certain marketing agendas, you flipped it, you're out of there. You don't have to worry about the building maintenance. But if you're retaining it,
That's a different thing altogether.
absolutely.
I think also it's actually the budget. So if you're driving a project based on cost and looking at cheaper, that won't work. I mean, you might after a few years have to rip, as you said, you have to rip or change things. If you're looking at what you need as a requirement long term, then you design it based on the requirement, not based on the cost, because eventually you're investing into that kind of solution. In the long run, after 10 years, that investment, you've got it back. But if you're focusing on just, quick and easy, I want more or less cheap things and put in, if, as you say, if you're retaining it and you're not flipping it, then you're going to be in the next couple of years spending more each year or every year. So when you do that kind of level, by the end of it, you'll have spent tripled the amount that you should have spent in the first place.
I agree with that 90%, and that's why as a manufacturer we're looking at build to rent, student housing, later living type stuff in the residential sector, because their developers are creating something with a view to it being run after, not just completing the building and walking away, making a sale. But even in things like build to sell, I think one of the problems we have, and I think this is an industry-wide thing, is we're not very good at explaining what's possible to those customers. Because, for instance, we have a thing where our more expensive answering unit that can go in a flat or an office or whatever can also link with things like smart systems, smart lighting, thermostats, whatever. So it's not full-on home automation, but it's also not the cost of full-on home automation. And, my thinking is, if you're going to build a block of flats, even if you're planning to sell them rather than rent them, yes, you might put in all the toys in the penthouse unit, but then you've got some other flats that are sort of, let's call it market rate. If you could put in a little bit of smart technology into those, maybe rather than look at doing everything as cheap as possible, maybe spending a little bit of money will make you a better return, because spending 500 or £1,000 extra in that apartment will separate you from your competition down the road, but also it's pretty easy to add, even on a resale value, 5 grand, 10 grand to the selling price of the flat, because it's got some niceties to it. And, if, as a property developer, if I said to you, I've got a way, you need to pay me £1,000, but you'll get £10,000 back for every £1,000 you give me, you'd bite my hand off, right?
Yeah, I'd buy 1,000 for those.
Exactly. But I think the system is geared to, well, they didn't ask for that, so we've got to find the cheapest way of doing it. So let's put the minimum, the lowest common denominator. And it's not just our systems, in general. And I think that's sometimes doing us disservice to say, well, but your goal is to create something that you can sell for significantly more money than it costs you to make it. And sometimes doing more and having a slightly higher cost up front actually is a better way to get to that goal, because then you've got a more exclusive, better positioned product, a better offering than just the same as every other block of flats or offices or whatever.
I think development's got to have a differentiator anyway. I do agree with you on that one. I think that there is an easier way to put technology in. Now it's not as expensive of having panels. But what do we make them do? So yeah, if you make your penthouse, let's say your KNX, your Savant, your top of the line, your middle apartments, why can't they have a level of technology, whether it be monitoring air quality, the ability to open and close curtains and things of that ilk, because it's not that expensive to do. So as long as the product's got the capability of doing it. And then the lower end, if that's social housing, you can just have the box standard, it answers the door and allows the door to be opened. And you can pretty much do that with all the 2M products, right from the entry level, as we did with the project that we did in Manchester for De Trafford. Yeah. I think the thing that I see from this conversation in general, because we've got an operator effectively, we've got integrators, we've got a manufacturer, we've got a distributor with CIE Group, is that the key thing I hear is it's about collaboration. It's about having that conversation to manage the expectation and say, look, these are the things that we can offer. Yes, cloud is there, and rightly, sometimes it's right for you, and maybe in other projects it's not right. I mean, you guys might develop a slightly different type of development going forward where you actually don't need cloud. But the point is, you know, we sit and talk and have the conversation with you, and it's refreshing to hear that in here, but also I think it is one of the changes we're seeing in the market. People are starting to realise there's so much been sold over the years that's just ticks a box. We're compliant, we've got a door entry system. Well, what does that mean? Instead of saying, well, actually, what can it do to benefit my business, add value to my properties, give me a better return on the money, maybe introduce a different type of client that we've never gone after before. So I think the general consensus is cloud is great as long as it works for your application.
I think that's exactly it. I think cloud's always going to be part of a solution. It's just how much. I mean, as a client stroke developer, we rely heavily on our integrators. So we know what we want and we know what's capable, but absolutely we need the integrators to install it. We need to work with manufacturers and push the manufacturers to the areas where we think it will be used most.
I don't think manufacturers get better. And remember, we represent manufacturers, so we push a lot of information to them and had a great working relationship for many, many years with 2N, helping to develop product. And the beauty of specifically with 2N is that they will accept that information. A lot of manufacturers will just go, well, what do you know? We know everything. We know our products are right, and they do everything. And you go, actually, there's a few things they do very, very well. There are a few things they do awfully. Whereas I think 2N has always been one of those forward-thinking companies that have always taken on board criticism, right or wrong, dependent on the view, filtered it, but then added it to a product or taken it away from a product, gone, that doesn't really work, but oh, we need more of that. But I think the more we get back from developers and actual operators and users, the better the product gets. And I think that's where manufacturers have going forward, and 2N certainly is one that's stepped up and listened, but there are other people in the market that need to start taking that on board. You know, at the end of the day, you guys drive the market. You make the choices about what you use.
We do, and we were chatting just before on air. The MEP consultants in our industry will often dictate to most developers what it is they have. So it's really the MEP consultants need to work more tightly with the integrators and distributors to understand what's out there, because they should be recommending a 2N or a different solution, but they're just recommending the same solution because they don't know about the latest solutions. And that's where you guys come in.
Yeah, and I think, you know, touching on one of your points before, organizations, even end users, security is important. Okay, but I think where the next couple of years where you drive it at even integrators, manufacturers, it's beyond security. So for an organization, especially how you, even with the cloud, how you capture data, what you do with the data, like how you action that data, it's operationals and HR and all that is being able to work more efficiently as an organization.
I think integration in this next 10-year period is going to see a significant change. We see it with AI now. We see things getting smarter, a lot quicker, a lot faster. But I do think you're totally right with that. It's not just about the security element about it. It's not just about the video door entry. It's also about the cybersecurity, the sustainability. So it's actually this whole topic of integration, an open API, and the ability to pick and choose what's right for the client without being locked. You've got to use this because that's all that that card user will use. You know, it'll only work with a particular type of system.
Well, I think you're also exactly right there. What does security mean? I mean, we're at a security event, but I won't name which bank, but sort of I was one of the managers who set up one of the telephone banks very early on. And you got security of the software and obviously the bank's information, but you got infrastructure security. You got the building comms security. Your biggest asset is your people. Security of your people, just not protection, but if the proverbial plane comes down, takes out the entire building, you need another building down there, but where are you going to staff it from? So, you know, you need all these things, and it's all part of security. And just bringing it back to cloud, having that stuff in the cloud, as long as it's
secure,
genuinely, robustly replicated across multiple sites, that proverbial plane comes in, technology-wise, you can keep running.
Yes.
It doesn't impact you. from that perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of other ramifications.
Yeah, you've got loss of life and whatever, but let us not lament on that one
But
too
you
much.
forget how much it's come on in literally a small time.
Oh yes.
I think the cloud, that it's there, it's on demand, and if it's used right or even used in the right terminology, it's going to grow. But I'll go back to the point as well. Education. I think it's about the education of when you talk to clients or end users, especially, operational directors or even facility management. Say cloud to them, they hear different things. That they won't fully understand that.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's whether we have to find that way of passing that right message to them, so then afterwards they can take it on. They'll understand it more. Education around.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think it is the term cloud is a great term, and it wraps so much into it. But the problem is it wraps too much, and to one man's cloud, to one man it means one thing. To another person it might mean it's just about infrastructure, but to another person it might be about operability. To another person it might be the fact that that's how we talk to it. It depends to the level where you are within an organization. To somebody who's a CEO might think that's a lot of money. Everybody's got a different take on it, haven't they? And it is about education, which is why we're doing the podcast. I think is to try and get this information out, get people's views, so that does educate people.
Well, and for me, one of the biggest educations is it doesn't have to be more expensive. Because you say that, the assumption is, oh, it's going to be more expensive. It's not.
No.
If you plan it in up front and you do it right, it's not more expensive. And it'll be cheaper in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hardest things we find as CIE group is, because we represent people that manufacturers that do this equipment, is getting that message over, not only to integrators, but getting it down granular down to the end user to say, look, this isn't as much. We see it actually in a slightly different market. We see it in the induction loop market. There's new technology come out, and of course, people automatically go, oh, well, Auracast is going to be 10 times the cost of a normal induction loop. It's actually the same cost. So all of a sudden it's turned that market on its head, and it's one of the things we're seeing is that, and that is technology, and of course that's now networkable, so that's cloud again. So all of a sudden now our induction loops are suddenly in the cloud, so it's another thing that's being added in. I think that the cloud, as I say, it's not hype. I think it is a real transformation. It is something that is going to continue to influence this market for the next 10 to 15 years, without a shadow of a doubt. We're only at the start of this, I think.
I think we'll just stop calling it the cloud, because that's how everything will work.
Yeah.
We won't be having this conversation.
Yeah, I wonder what we'll call it.
Well, and also the cloud, I'm just thinking in 2N terms, does multiple different things. So we talked about it for managing access control, and you remotely being able to issue or take away access from someone in a building in Sidcup. But it's also, for 2N, it started out as a way of getting calls from an intercom to a mobile phone.
Yeah.
But what I found is that same mechanism. So we're using the cloud because we don't know where the mobile phone is. We don't know what it's connected to in terms of a network. So we have to take the call into the cloud and then find where the phone is and find a way to get to it. But then that same mechanism is basically bridging a call between two networks. So that can be a call that goes to a reception desk 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, out of hours, can be sent to some central hub for an office company that's got 10 buildings, and they have a security hub for out of hours answering. It's exactly the same mechanism, and it becomes just another tool in the toolbox. And like you said, some customers will end up not using it at all, and others it will allow them to do something they couldn't do before. Or maybe do it with less people, or do it differently that's better for their business. But that's the way it is. I see AI as the same thing. It's not a magic wand that just fixes everything. It's like you have to have a problem that needs solving, and these are tools that can help make it more manageable to solve those problems.
I'm wondering if the term is not cloud. I wonder if it is a telephony term, which is unified communications. Because most things are communicating in a network, they're communicating with something.
Yeah, I mean, inherently there's processing. I think what's changed in the last 20, 30 years is the speed and reliability of communications. So to the level where it used to just be for the niche, like banking, where a millisecond cost millions, in the markets. And we used to work in that area, or I used to work in that area. Whereas now the speed you get as Joe Public, it is that speed and better, and it's more reliable. But the inherent cloud is there's processing going on there, like AWS, there's processing that goes on there, and the communications is what enables you to do it. Because still go back, it really is, the mainframe was the cloud. It's just that was hosted in the building, and all the dumb terminals were the clients, but they were linked by a wire, whereas now they're linked by IP, which is going via Wi-Fi, and it's just more,
But one of the things you touch upon there, and you mentioned this earlier, that's less obvious, is it opens the door to integration, because suddenly everybody is starting to use more standards-based communication because their own systems are broken into pieces that need to communicate between one another. But we're using internet IP, network cabling and all the rest of it. So then that means, well, hang on, there are other systems maybe in the same building that are also using the network cables and are using IP. Oh, so for instance, we have an integration with Coney Lifts where, we let someone in the front door because they've got a card or a fob or a phone or whatever that says they belong to the building. So we open the door, but at the same time, we know they live on the 5th floor. Well, the lift system might find that information useful. Oh, so our cloud knows that about that person is at that point in the building. How about we share that with Coney's cloud, because it knows how to talk to the elevators in that building and bring down a car with the 5th floor pre-selected. Because it's just a piece of data that we have that's sort of useful to us, but is also useful to this other company and other system.
I mean, that part it also said, I mean, everyone say it, is how you deal with the data. I mean, that's the thing. You have different technology data, but when you bring that data in, you can do it endless.
As long as you protect the data, the data is very useful and it can be used in so many different ways.
Right.
We've seen that with the integration in lift control. We've seen it with integration of barriers. We see it with integration, and these are all these elements that everybody expects now the cloud to basically control all of that and give them the ability to, they want to arrive in the car and automatically open the barrier, or it recognize who they are in whichever manner it does, and then know that it's them at the lift and move from there.
And I think that unified comms, the IP, as it did for the is a real enabler, because we are integrating with fire alarm systems, misting systems, AOV systems, just because it's so easy.
Yeah, I think that's probably.
And they're hosted in the cloud, but they talk the same language.
And it's about the communication of the language, isn't it? And once you can get everybody on the same, or the ability to not necessarily go through a very heavy where SIP has probably changed the market, particularly when 2N came in, is the fact that it's a universal protocol. Once you've got a universal language, then everybody finds it's a lot easier to talk to each other. And then it's just making sure that manufacturers allow their equipment to be able to be communicated with or to pass information to other systems. And that is that open API SDK element of it, which I think we're seeing more and more. I think that's one of the single biggest changes I've seen, is that people now, it's not a charge anymore. And it's like, yo, you want it, no problem. Here you go, here's the development kit.
As a developer, we definitely see that. And I think what that is a lot of new manufacturers, stuff happens faster. So the way for them to sell quickly and build a market is to be open. Whereas your historic companies who traditionally want to be more protective, but the new companies, a lot of whom are driving this, or the innovative older companies, they want to be open, because the more people they can talk to, the more they can sell.
That's it, yeah. Great, gentlemen. This has been the Integration Exchange. We have had a great exchange. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, it's good, right. Thank you.
And we're off.